When two teenage siblings are cast out of the system, with nothing but a rusty key to a grandfather they never knew, they unlock a 50-year-old secret buried beneath his abandoned farm. A secret that could either save them or break them completely. What they found there wasn't just about the past, it was about whether they had a future at all. And if this is the kind of story that hits close to home for you, maybe stick around. Hit that subscribe button, because we're building a community here for people who've had to fight for their place in the world. The sound I remember most from that day wasn't the click of the lock on the group home door behind me, or the tired sigh of Miss Albright as she handed me the stiff manila envelope. It was the squeak of my sister's worn-out sneakers on the polished linoleum floor, a tiny, hesitant sound that said everything I was feeling. She was 12, all sharp elbows and watchful eyes, and she was hiding behind my arm like I was some kind of shield. I was 17, a month shy of being a legal adult, which in the eyes of the state meant I was already one. Grown. Ready. It was a joke. I had $94 in my pocket, a duffel bag with 3 changes of clothes, and my sister's hand clamped onto my wrist so tight I could feel her pulse, a frantic little bird trapped in her veins. Ms. Albright cleared her throat, a dry, papery sound. "Leo," she said, avoiding my eyes. "The bus ticket is inside. And the key. It's all the county could arrange." She was a good person, I think, just worn down to the nub by a system that ran on paperwork and quiet desperation. She saw dozens of kids like me cycle through, kids whose childhoods had been neatly filed away in beige cabinets. She couldn't afford to let any one of us break her heart. Not anymore. I nodded, because speaking felt like it would take more energy than I had. The envelope was cool and heavy in my hand, a final piece of institutional bureaucracy. It felt like a dismissal. For 2 years since the accident, this had been our life. 2 years of scheduled meals, mandatory group therapy, and the constant, low-grade hum of other people's trauma. 2 years of learning to make ourselves small, to not cause trouble, to wait. Now the waiting was over. "Where are we going?" Maya's voice was a whisper against my sleeve. I looked down at the top of her head, her dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She was trying so hard to be brave, but I could see the tremor in her shoulders. I wished, not for the first time, that I was the person she thought I was. Someone strong. Someone who had a plan. "To a farm," I said, trying to make it sound like an adventure. "Grandpa Arthur's place, remember? Mom used to tell us stories." The stories were faint, like faded photographs. A grandfather we'd never met. A man who had a falling out with our mother long before we were born. A farm somewhere in the northern part of the state. A place with a big red barn and fields that smelled like rain. It was a fairy tale, something to fill the empty spaces where family history should have been. Now that fairy tale was our last resort. The envelope contained a one-way bus ticket to a town called Harmony Creek, a place I couldn't have found on a map. It also contained a single, old-fashioned iron key, pitted with rust, and a deed so brittle it looked like it would crumble to dust if I held it too tightly. A letter from a county clerk explained, in cold, legal terms, that the property of the late Arthur Vance, our maternal grandfather, had passed to our mother, and now to us. It was encumbered by years of unpaid taxes and liens. The county had no interest in it. We were free to claim it, or let it be auctioned off. It was a choice between a forgotten piece of land and absolute homelessness. It wasn't a choice at all. Miss Albright gave my shoulder a clumsy pat. "Be good, Leo. Look after her." Her gaze flickered to Maya, and for a second, I saw a crack in her professional armor. A flicker of genuine fear. She knew what the world did to kids like us. I just nodded again, pulling Maya closer. "I will." We walked out into the pale afternoon light, the door swinging shut behind us with a pneumatic hiss. The air smelled of exhaust fumes and rain. For a moment, we just stood on the sidewalk, 2 small islands in the middle of a rushing city. The world felt enormous and loud, and we had never been so alone. The bus ride was a long, rumbling journey from the concrete and noise of the city to the quiet, rolling green of the countryside. We sat near the back, the duffel bag on the seat between us. Maya fell asleep after the first hour, her head resting on my shoulder, her breathing slow and even. I stayed awake, watching the landscape change through the grimy window. The strip malls and suburbs gave way to wide open fields, then dense forests of pine and oak. The sky seemed to get bigger, the clouds wider. With every mile that passed, I felt a strange mixture of terror and a fragile, unfamiliar flicker of hope. This was a chance. A broken, forgotten, debt-ridden chance, but a chance nonetheless. Maybe, just maybe, we could build something out of the wreckage. Or maybe we were just heading toward a different kind of institution, one with a leaky roof and no electricity. The bus finally wheezed to a stop in what I assumed was Harmony Creek. It wasn't so much a town as a crossroads. A gas station with a closed sign swinging in the breeze, a boarded-up diner, and a small post office. That was it. The bus driver gave us a pitying look as he unloaded our bag. "This is it, kids. End of the line." He grunted, then climbed back into the bus, leaving us in a cloud of diesel smoke. The silence that descended after it drove away was absolute. It was broken only by the chirping of crickets and the rustle of wind in the tall grass. A man in dusty overalls was sitting on the post office steps, whittling a piece of wood. He watched us for a long moment, his eyes narrowed. "You the Vance kids?" he asked, his voice raspy. I was surprised he knew who we were. "Yeah, I'm Leo, this is Maya." "Figured," he said, not unkindly. "Heard you were coming. I'm Earl, knew your granddad, a stubborn old goat, Arthur was." He pointed a thumb down a narrow, cracked asphalt road. "His place is about 3 miles that way. You can't miss it. The old red barn is the only thing standing taller than the trees." 3 miles felt like 100. The sun was starting to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The air grew cooler, smelling of damp earth and pine needles. Maya walked beside me, her earlier bravery fading into exhaustion. She didn't complain, but I could hear the drag of her feet. My own shoulders ached from the weight of the duffel bag. We were city kids. This kind of walking, this kind of quiet, was alien to us. Finally, we saw it. Through a break in the trees, a sagging roofline, and the peak of a barn, its red paint faded to a dull, rusty brown. A weathered wooden sign, half swallowed by ivy, read, "Vance Farm." The driveway was more of a suggestion, 2 ruts of dirt almost completely overgrown with weeds. The house itself was a skeleton. A 2-story farmhouse, its windows were dark, hollow eyes. The porch tilted at a dangerous angle, and the white paint had peeled away in long strips, revealing the gray, weathered wood beneath. It looked like it had been forgotten by the world 50 years ago. My heart sank. This wasn't a home. This was a ruin. "Leo?" Maya whispered, her voice trembling. "Is this it?" I tried to find the right words, something reassuring, but the sight of the place had stolen them. I just squeezed her hand. "This is it," I said, my own voice hollow. "Let's go see inside." The iron key was cold in my hand. It scraped in the rusty lock, and for a moment, I was sure it wouldn't turn. Then, with a groan of protest, the mechanism gave way. The door swung inward on a single, shrieking hinge, opening into darkness. The air that rushed out was thick and musty, the smell of dust, decay, and trapped time. It was the smell of a place that hadn't seen a living soul in decades. We stepped inside, into the gloom. Dust motes danced in the thin shafts of light, slanting through the grimy windows. Furniture lay shrouded in white cloths, like ghosts in a silent parlor. A thick layer of dust covered every surface. In the center of the main room, a single rocking chair sat facing a cold, stone fireplace. It was as if someone had just gotten up and walked out, intending to come right back, and never did. We explored the house room by room, our footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. The kitchen was a time capsule from another era, with a cast-iron stove and a faded linoleum floor. Upstairs, 2 small bedrooms held simple wooden bed frames, their mattresses stripped bare. In one room, a small desk sat under a window, a dried-up inkwell, and a single, yellowed piece of paper on its surface. The paper was blank. It was all so empty, so profoundly sad. This wasn't the fresh start I had been hoping for. It was an ending. A long, slow, dusty ending. Maya, who had been quiet for so long, finally broke. She sat down on the dusty stairs and buried her face in her hands, her small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "I want to go back," she cried, her voice muffled. "I don't like it here." I sat down beside her, pulling her into a hug. My own throat was tight. "Go back where, May? There's nowhere to go back to." It was the cruel truth of our situation. The group home wasn't home. This ruin wasn't home. We were suspended between 2 places that didn't want us. I held her until her sobs subsided into quiet sniffles. The last of the sunlight faded, plunging the house into near total darkness. We had no electricity, no running water, no food beyond the 2 granola bars in my pocket. The scale of our foolishness, of our desperation, hit me with the force of a physical blow. We were going to fail. We were going to end up back in the system, separated this time, and it would be all my fault. That night, we slept on the floor of the living room, huddled together under my thin jacket for warmth. The old house groaned and creaked around us, the wind whistling through the cracks in the walls. Every sound was magnified in the dark, every shadow seemed to hold a threat. I didn't sleep. I lay there, listening to Maya's breathing, and stared up at a ceiling I couldn't see, feeling the crushing weight of being 17 and in charge of another person's life. I had to do something. I had to find a way to make this work. The next morning, I woke up stiff and cold, but with a sliver of resolve. We couldn't stay in the house. It was too depressing, too full of ghosts. The barn, I thought. At least the barn had a purpose. Earl had said it was the one thing still standing tall. The barn was massive, far larger than it had looked from the road. Its great wooden doors were swollen shut, and it took all my weight to force one of them open enough for us to squeeze through. The interior was cavernous, smelling of old hay, earth, and machine oil. Light streamed in through gaps in the roof, illuminating a cathedral of dust. An ancient, rust-eaten tractor sat in the center, looking like the fossil of some long-extinct beast. Stalls lined one wall, their wooden gates hanging crookedly. A hayloft stretched over half the space, accessible by a rickety ladder. It was here, in the quiet grandeur of the barn, that I felt the first real spark of something other than despair. This was a place of work, a place where things were built and things grew. While Maya explored the hayloft, cautiously testing each step, I started to poke around on the ground floor. Tucked away in a small workshop area, I found a heavy wooden workbench. On it, propped against a wall, was a framed photograph. It was coated in dust, but when I wiped it clean, I saw a man and a woman standing in front of the farmhouse. The house in the picture was new, its paint bright white, its porch straight and strong. The man was tall and lean, with a serious face and kind eyes. The woman beside him was smiling, her hand resting on his arm. My grandparents, Arthur and Eleanor. They looked young, full of the same kind of hope I was so desperately trying to find. Tucked into the corner of the frame was a folded, yellowed piece of paper. I carefully worked it free. It was a letter, written in a strong, slanted hand. "My dearest Eleanor," it began. "If you are reading this, then the worst has happened, and I have gone before you. Do not grieve for long, my love. Our time was good. I have made arrangements. The bankers and the vultures will come, but they will find nothing of value. What matters is buried. Safe from them, safe for our girl. If she ever needs it, tell her to look where the summer sun sets on the longest day. Under the heart of the farm. Protect our legacy. All my love, Arthur. My hands were shaking as I read it. Our girl. He meant our mother. And he had hidden something he called a legacy. Under the heart of the farm. What did that mean? I looked around the vast barn. This felt like the heart of the farm. But where to look? Where the summer sun sets on the longest day. The longest day of the year was the summer solstice, late June. The sun would set in the northwest. I walked to the western wall of the barn. There were no windows, just solid, weathered planks. I stood there, trying to picture it. Where would the light fall? There were gaps in the wood, and I could see thin slivers of the afternoon sun piercing the gloom. One ray of light, thicker than the others, cut through a knothole high up on the wall and landed squarely on a specific section of the dirt floor. It was nothing special, just packed earth like the rest of the floor. But it was a spot, a specific spot. "Maya," I called, my voice tight with excitement. "Come here, I think I found something." She scrambled down the ladder, her face smudged with dirt. "What is it?" I showed her the letter. She read it over my shoulder, her brow furrowed in concentration. "What's a legacy?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. "But we're going to find out." We started digging with our bare hands, clawing at the hard-packed earth. It was slow, frustrating work. After a few minutes, our fingers were raw. I looked around the workshop for a tool. Anything. I found an old, rusty spade with a cracked wooden handle. It was heavy and awkward, but it was better than nothing. I started to dig in the spot where the light had been. The dirt was dense, compacted by decades of pressure. With each shovelful, I felt a growing sense of anticipation, mixed with the fear of disappointment. What if it was nothing? What if it was just a crazy old man's ramblings? After about a foot, the spade hit something hard with a dull thud. Not a rock. It was a flat, solid sound. My heart hammered against my ribs. "I hit something," I yelled. Maya dropped to her knees beside me, and we dug frantically with our hands, pulling away the loose dirt. Slowly, an edge was revealed. It was dark, metallic. We kept digging, our movements frantic now, until we had uncovered the whole thing. It was a square, iron plate, about 3 feet by 3 feet, set flush with a concrete slab beneath the dirt. In the center was a recessed handle, and beside it a heavy-duty keyhole, the kind you'd see on a bank vault. It wasn't just a box, it was a vault. Sealed. Buried under the floor of a barn for who knows how long. We stared at it, breathless. It was real. Everything he wrote in the letter was real. But we had no key. The key Ms. Albright had given us was for the house. This was something else entirely. We searched the workbench, the shelves, every nook and cranny of the barn. Nothing. We went back to the house and tore it apart, looking for another key, another clue. We found nothing but more dust and disappointment. By evening, we were exhausted and defeated. We sat on the edge of the hole in the barn, staring at the locked iron plate as the light faded. It was so close. A lifetime of answers, of possibilities, was right there, inches beneath our feet, and we couldn't reach it. "Maybe it's a combination," Maya suggested quietly. "Like in the movies." I ran my hand over the cool metal. There was no dial, no keypad, just the keyhole. A stubborn, silent refusal. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit it with the spade until my arms gave out. It felt like the universe was dangling a solution in front of us, just to snatch it away. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the key. Where would a man like Arthur, a man who went to such great lengths to hide something, keep the key? He wouldn't leave it lying around. He would hide it somewhere clever, somewhere meaningful. I thought about the letter. Protect our legacy. I thought about the picture of him and my grandmother. They looked so connected, so in love. Where was her half of the story? The next day, I went back to the house with a new idea. I started in the kitchen. I looked in the old tin canisters for flour and sugar. Nothing. I checked behind the loose brick in the fireplace. Cobwebs. Then I went upstairs, to the bedroom with the little desk. I sat in the chair, trying to imagine my grandmother, Eleanor, sitting here. What was important to her? My eyes fell on the window. Outside, a single, massive oak tree stood in the yard, its branches spreading wide. It was the only living thing that looked as old as the house. I remembered another one of my mom's fragmented stories. Something about her mother loving that tree, about sitting under it to read. I raced downstairs and out into the yard. The oak was immense, its bark thick and gnarled. I walked around its base, running my hands over the rough surface. Halfway around, my fingers brushed against something smooth and cold embedded in the bark. It was a small, metal plaque, nearly swallowed by the tree's growth. I had to use my pocket knife to pry the bark away. The plaque was tarnished, but I could make out the engraved letters, a +E. Arthur and Eleanor. And just below the initials, there was a tiny, almost invisible seam. It was a keyhole. A very, very small one. My heart leaped. I fumbled in my pocket for the only other metal object we owned, the rusty iron key to the front door. It was too big, too crude. It wouldn't fit. I slumped against the tree, defeated again. Then I looked at the key more closely. It was old and simple, but the top, the part you hold, was unusually thick. And there was a faint line running around its edge, as if it were two pieces fitted together. It was a long shot. A crazy, desperate idea. I twisted it. At first, nothing happened. I put all my strength into it, my knuckles turning white. With a faint click, it came apart in my hands. The thick, ornamental top was a shell. And nestled inside it, gleaming and perfectly preserved, was a second, smaller, more intricate key. A vault key. I ran back to the barn, yelling for Maya. I felt like I could fly. She met me at the door, her eyes wide. I held up the small brass key, and a slow smile spread across her face. We knelt by the hole, my hands trembling so badly I could barely fit the key into the lock. It slid in perfectly. I took a deep breath and turned it. There was a loud, satisfying series of clicks as internal tumblers aligned. Then, silence. I pulled on the recessed handle. It was heavy, but it moved. With a deep groan of metal on metal, the iron plate lifted, revealing a dark, square opening and a set of steep concrete steps leading down into the earth. A wave of cool, dry air washed over us, smelling of old paper and cedar. We had found it. We had opened it. I grabbed a dusty lantern from the workshop, hoping it still had oil in it. It did. I lit the wick, and a warm, flickering light pushed back the darkness. Holding the lantern high, I started down the steps, Maya close behind me. The vault was a small, concrete-lined room, no bigger than a walk-in closet. It was completely dry and immaculately organized. Against one wall were 3 large metal footlockers. Against the other, shelves filled with glass jars containing seeds, all neatly labeled in the same slanted handwriting. In the center of the room was a small wooden table, and on it, a single, thick, leather-bound ledger and a stack of envelopes tied with a faded blue ribbon. This wasn't a treasure vault filled with gold and jewels. It was something else entirely. It was a time capsule. An ark. It was my grandfather's legacy. I picked up the top envelope. It was addressed to my daughter, my mother. I handed it to Maya and picked up the ledger. I opened it to the first page. The entry was dated 50 years ago. It began with 2 simple words. I'm sorry. I sat down at the little table, the lantern light casting dancing shadows on the concrete walls, and began to read the story of our family. the story that had been waiting for us, buried in the dark for half a century. My grandfather, Arthur, wasn't just a farmer. He was an inventor, a brilliant agriculturalist who had developed a series of blight-resistant seed strains. He poured everything he had into his work, believing it could help feed people, make small farms viable against the encroachment of big corporations. But he made a mistake. He trusted the wrong partner, a man who stole his research, patented it under his own name, and then used a team of lawyers to systematically destroy my grandfather's reputation and finances. He was sued into oblivion, left with nothing but the farm and a mountain of debt. The court battles, the stress, it broke him. It made him paranoid, distrustful of everyone. It's why he pushed our mother away when she wanted to marry our father, a man from the city he didn't trust. He didn't want her to be tied to his failure, his fight. The vault wasn't about hiding wealth. It was about preserving his life's work. The jars on the shelves contained his original, unmodified seeds. The footlockers, I soon discovered, were filled not with money, but with his detailed research notes, diagrams, and journals. Decades of work that proved he was the true inventor. The ledger was a meticulous record of every threat, every legal notice, every betrayal he had endured. It was a mountain of evidence. The last envelope in the stack was addressed to whoever finds this. It was addressed to us. I opened it, my fingers fumbling with the seal. The letter inside was long, filling several pages. His handwriting was steady, but the words were filled with a lifetime of pain and regret. "If you are reading this," he wrote, "it means I failed. It means I couldn't fix what was broken in my lifetime. It means the world has taken this farm from my family, or is about to. I am sorry. I am sorry for the fight I could not win, and I am sorry for the silence I chose. I thought protecting my work was the most important thing. I built this vault to keep it safe from the thieves who destroyed me. But in walling off my work, I walled off my heart. I lost my daughter. I never met my grandchildren. That is a regret I will take to my grave. This farm is more than dirt and wood. It is an idea. The idea that one family, on one small piece of land, can be independent, can be free. The seeds on these shelves are my proof. The notes in these trunks are my testament. They are worth nothing to a bank, but they are everything to a farmer. Do with them what you will. Sell them, plant them, burn them. The choice is yours. But know this, the land remembers, and it will provide for those who care for it. There is one more thing. In the third trunk, at the bottom, beneath the journals, you will find a false bottom. I saved what I could. It is not a fortune. It is not enough to make you rich. But it might be enough to give you a start. Use it wisely. Use it to live. Don't make the same mistakes I did. Don't let pride and fear cost you your family. It is the only legacy that truly matters. I put the letter down, my vision blurred with tears. I cried for the grandfather I never knew, a man so broken by the world that he buried himself alive. I cried for my mother, who must have felt so abandoned, never knowing the truth. And I cried for myself and Maya, for the years we had spent feeling like we came from nothing, when all along, this story was waiting for us, right here. Maya had been reading our mother's letter. Her face was pale. "He loved her," she whispered. "He was just scared." I nodded, unable to speak. We went to the third trunk. It was heavy. We lifted the lid and carefully removed the stacks of journals and notebooks. Just as he'd said, there was a false bottom. I pried it up with my pocket knife. Underneath, wrapped in oilcloth, were thick bundles of cash. Old bills, but still legal tender. We counted it right there, on the dusty floor of the vault. It was $30,000. To a corporation, it was a rounding error. To two kids with less than $100 to their name, it was a lifeline. It was a kingdom. It was enough. We sat there for a long time, in the quiet, cool air of the vault, the weight of the past 50 years settling over us. The money was a shock, a miracle. But it was the letters, the journals, the seeds, That was the real inheritance. We now knew who we were. We were Vances, and this was our land. The next morning, the real world came calling. A sleek, black car crunched up our overgrown driveway, and a man in a crisp suit stepped out. He looked at the dilapidated farmhouse with a look of distaste. He introduced himself as Mr. Peterson, a representative from the bank that held the lien on the property. He was polite, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Leo Vance?" he asked, looking at a file in his hand. "I'm here to deliver this foreclosure notice in person. The property will be auctioned in 30 days. However," he continued, holding up a hand, "the bank is prepared to make you an offer. We will forgive the back taxes and give you and your sister $5,000 to relocate, in exchange for you signing over the deed today. It's a generous offer. Frankly, the land is worthless. We'd be doing you a favor, clearing this mess off your hands. $5,000. A week ago, that would have sounded like a fortune. A chance to get an apartment in the city, to disappear back into the anonymous crowd. The easy way out." I looked past him, at the old barn standing against the morning sky. I thought of the vault beneath it. I thought of the jars of seeds, each one a promise. I thought of my grandfather's words, "The land remembers." I looked at Maya, who was standing on the porch behind me. She was watching me, her expression serious. I saw no fear in her eyes, only trust. I turned back to the man in the suit. "No," I said. My voice didn't shake. "The answer is no." Mr. Peterson's smile vanished. "Excuse me?" "We're not selling," I said, more firmly this time. "This is our home. We're going to pay the back taxes." He scoffed, a short, ugly sound. "With what, kid? Good intentions? The debt on this place is over $25,000. You have 30 days. He shoved the foreclosure notice into my hand, got back in his car, and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust in his wake. 30 days. $25,000. He was right. It was an impossible number. But he didn't know about the third trunk. He didn't know about Arthur Vance. For the first time in my life, I had a secret. I had a weapon. I had a choice. That afternoon, I took $10,000 of the money from the vault and hitched a ride into the nearest proper town with Earl, the old man from the post office. He didn't ask any questions, just gave me a knowing look. I walked into the county tax office, a place that smelled of stale coffee and bureaucracy, and paid the full amount of our back taxes in cash. The clerk, a woman with tired eyes, had to count it 3 times. She stamped our file, paid in full, with a loud, satisfying thud. Walking out of that office, I felt 10 feet tall. I had done it. I had faced the system that had chewed up my grandfather, the system that had spit us out, and I had won the first battle. But I knew it wasn't the end. Mr. Peterson and his bank wouldn't just go away. They wanted the land for a reason. But now, we had time. We had a foothold. When I got back to the farm, Maya had been busy. She had found a broom and swept the entire porch. She had pulled the weeds from the flower beds in front of the house, revealing a row of sturdy, stubborn rose bushes that were still, somehow, alive. It wasn't much, but it was a start. It was a claim. That evening, we sat on the clean porch steps and watched the sunset. We ate canned stew I had bought at the town's general store, the first hot meal we'd had in days. "We did it, didn't we?" Maya said, her voice soft. "We're really going to stay." "Yeah," I said, looking out at the fields that were ours. "We're home." The weeks that followed were the hardest and best of our lives. We worked from sunrise to sunset. We started with the house, scrubbing away decades of dust and grime. We patched the leaky roof with tar we bought in town. We replaced the broken window panes. Earl showed me how to prime the old water pump in the yard, and after an hour of frantic work, we were rewarded with a gush of clear, cold water. It felt like a miracle. We drank straight from the pump, laughing, the cold water splashing our faces. Every small victory felt monumental. Every repaired fence post, every cleared patch of land, was a piece of our future we were building with our own hands. I spent the nights in the vault, reading my grandfather's journals. I learned about crop rotation, about soil health, about the delicate science of growing things. His words were a roadmap, a textbook written by a ghost. He wrote about his failures as much as his successes, and in doing so, he taught me that farming wasn't about perfection. It was about resilience. One day, a man named Mr. Henderson showed up. He was older, with a kind face and work-worn hands. He was a local lawyer. "Earl sent me," he said, getting straight to the point. "Heard you kids were trying to make a go of it. Heard the bank is trying to squeeze you out." He explained that the bank was owned by a subsidiary of a massive agrochemical corporation, the very same one that had stolen my grandfather's research 50 years ago. They didn't want the land. They wanted what was on it. They suspected Arthur Vance had kept his original research, his original seeds, and they wanted to bury it for good. They couldn't have a pesky heir show up with proof of their company's fraudulent origins. Mr. Henderson looked at me, his eyes serious. "They will not make this easy for you, son. They will try to find a loophole. They will try to bleed you dry." I took him down to the vault. I showed him the ledger, the journals, the evidence my grandfather had so meticulously collected. He spent hours reading, his expression growing more and more grim. When he was done, he looked up at me, a flicker of something fierce in his eyes. "My God," he whispered, "this changes everything. This isn't just a foreclosure defense. This is a David and Goliath story. And I, for one, have always rooted for David." He agreed to represent us, pro bono. He said it was the most important case he'd ever see. The fight wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. But for the first time, we weren't alone in it. We had the truth on our side. We had the land under our feet. And we had each other. The work continued. We used some of the remaining money to buy an old but functional rototiller. I spent a week turning over the soil in the field closest to the house, preparing it for planting. The earth was rich and dark. It smelled of life. One afternoon, Maya came running out of the barn, her face lit up with excitement. "Leo, look!" She was holding a small wooden box. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, were dozens of packets of flower seeds. Eleanor's flowers, zinnias, marigolds, cosmos. On the inside of the lid, in her delicate handwriting, it said, "Beauty is not a luxury, it is a necessity." While I was focused on the fight, on the legacy of my grandfather, Maya had found the legacy of our grandmother. That weekend, we didn't work on the field. We worked on the garden. We planted every single one of those seeds around the house, in the old flower beds, along the porch. We were planting beauty. We were planting hope. As the weeks turned into months, the farm slowly began to wake up from its long slumber. Our first crops, simple things, potatoes and beans and squash, grown from Arthur's seeds, began to sprout. The house, once a ruin, started to feel like a home. We painted the porch. We hung curtains Maya sewed from old bedsheets. The rose bushes, tended and watered, produced a riot of deep red blooms. It wasn't perfect. It was hard. Some days, I was so tired I could barely move. Some nights, I lay awake, terrified of the legal battle that was looming. But then morning would come, and I would see the sun rise over our fields, and I would feel a sense of peace I had never known. This was real. We were building something that was ours. Looking back on it now, I realized that what we found under that barn floor wasn't a treasure. It was a map. It was a story. It was a choice. My grandfather buried his work to protect it, but in doing so, he buried his heart. He gave us the chance to unearth both. The choice he gave us wasn't about money or land. It was about what kind of people we wanted to be. Were we going to be people who took the easy way out, who let the past stay buried? Or were we going to be people who fought for something, who tended a garden, who believed in a legacy? We chose to dig. We chose to plant. We chose to stay. That right there is the core of it. We all have these vaults in our lives, don't we? Places where we bury the past, the pain, the things we think we can't face. We lock it away and try to forget. But sometimes, the only way forward is to go back, to find the key, to open the door, and to face the ghosts inside. Because sometimes, those ghosts have left you a map. They've left you the seeds of a future you can't yet imagine. Our story isn't over. The legal battle with the corporation will be long and hard. There are no guarantees. But standing here, on the porch of our home, watching my sister water the flowers our grandmother planted in spirit 50 years ago, I know we've already won the only fight that matters. We found our place. We found our story. We found our home. And if you've ever felt lost, if you've ever been handed an envelope and told you were on your own, I want you to know that you are not alone. There are stories like this everywhere, stories of resilience, of finding light in the darkest of places. That's what this channel is all about. It's a community for people who understand that sometimes you have to build your home with your own two hands. So if our story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button. And in the comments below, I want you to tell me, what's the one thing you fought for that made you who you are today? I'll be reading every single one. Because your story matters. Thank you for listening.